Most people assume that those who have no close friends are simply unlucky. They imagine the problem lies outside the individual, that people are unfriendly, society is cold, or circumstances never allowed meaningful relationships to develop. But if you study human psychology long enough, you begin to notice a deeper pattern. Loneliness is often less about the absence of people and more about the invisible barriers we create within ourselves. Human beings are social creatures by nature. From the earliest days of civilization, survival depended on trust, cooperation, and belonging. To be accepted by a group meant safety, to be isolated meant vulnerability. Yet despite this biological need for connection, many people unconsciously construct emotional fortresses around themselves. They convince themselves these walls offer protection when in reality they become prisons. The first personality trait is emotional guardedness. This doesn't mean someone never smiles or never speaks. Emotional guardedness is far more subtle. It is the habit of revealing almost nothing about your inner world. You speak about facts, but never feelings. You listen to others without allowing them to truly know you. Every conversation remains polite, intelligent, even enjoyable, but never meaningful. Why does this happen? Because somewhere in the past, trust became associated with pain. Perhaps someone betrayed your confidence. Perhaps you opened your heart only to be rejected. Maybe you grew up in an environment where expressing emotion was considered weakness. Whatever the reason, the mind learned a dangerous lesson. If people cannot reach your heart, they cannot hurt it. At first, this strategy appears wise. You avoid disappointment. You avoid vulnerability. You avoid emotional chaos. But psychology teaches us something uncomfortable. The same wall that keeps pain out also keeps love, loyalty, and friendship from coming in. Think about every meaningful relationship you've ever admired. None were built on perfection. They were built on moments of honesty. Someone admitted fear, someone revealed uncertainty, someone chose authenticity over performance. People rarely become friends because one person appears flawless. They become friends because they recognize themselves in another person's humanity. When someone remains emotionally inaccessible, others eventually stop trying. They interpret silence as disinterest. They mistake emotional distance for arrogance. They assume, maybe this person simply doesn't want a connection. Most of the time, that assumption is completely wrong. The guarded individual desperately wants connection. They simply fear the cost of achieving it. This is one of psychology's greatest paradoxes. The stronger your desire to avoid rejection, the more likely you become to experience isolation. Now consider the second personality trait, excessive self-reliance. Modern culture praises independence. We admire the individual who claims, "I don't need anyone." It sounds powerful, it sounds disciplined, it even sounds admirable, but there is a fine line between independence and emotional isolation. True confidence allows you to stand alone when necessary. False confidence convinces you that standing alone is the only safe option. Many people who struggle with friendships secretly believe dependence is weakness. They pride themselves on solving every problem without asking for help. They refuse support even when they desperately need it. They avoid leaning on others because somewhere deep inside they believe that needing people makes them vulnerable. This mindset often develops after repeated disappointment. Someone breaks a promise. Someone abandons you. Someone takes advantage of your kindness. Gradually, your mind creates another protective rule. Never depend on anyone again. Initially, this philosophy feels empowering. You become efficient, you become capable, you become resilient, but something subtle begins to happen. Relationships require mutual exchange. Friendship is not built on one person appearing endlessly strong while the other simply watches. Genuine friendship grows through shared experiences, shared struggles, and shared vulnerability. When you never ask for help, people assume you don't need them. When you never reveal difficulty, people believe everything is always fine. When you insist on carrying every burden alone, you unknowingly remove others from your emotional life. Ironically, people often feel closest to those they have been able to support. Allowing someone to help you is not weakness. It is trust. It communicates something powerful without saying a word. I believe you are safe enough to stand beside me. That simple act creates emotional investment. Psychologists have long observed that relationships strengthen through reciprocity. Human connection is not a transaction, but it is balanced. We naturally grow closer to those with whom we exchange support, understanding, and trust. If one person always remains emotionally untouchable, that balance disappears. The relationship never moves beyond acquaintance. There is another hidden danger behind excessive self-reliance. Over time, you begin identifying with it. It becomes your personality. You start saying things like, I've always been a loner. I work better alone. I don't trust people. These statements feel like observations, but they slowly become identities, and identities are powerful because people act consistently with who they believe they are. The moment loneliness becomes part of your identity, you stop looking for opportunities to connect. You begin noticing only evidence that confirms your belief. This is confirmation bias at work. Every disappointing interaction reinforces your world view. Every failed conversation becomes proof that people cannot be trusted. Meanwhile, every opportunity for genuine friendship goes unnoticed because your attention is fixed on protecting yourself. The greatest prison is not the one built by society, it is the one built by your own expectations. The truth is this: strength has never been measured by how little you need people. Real strength is measured by your ability to remain open without becoming naive, to trust without surrendering your judgment, to care without losing your self-respect, to build meaningful relationships while maintaining your independence. This balance is rare because it requires courage, not the courage to fight others, the courage to lower your defenses just enough for authentic connection to become possible. Every meaningful friendship begins with a small risk, a conversation that goes beyond surface-level words, a moment of honesty, an admission that you don't have everything figured out. These moments appear insignificant, yet they reshape lives. Because behind every lasting friendship is one person who decided to stop hiding. If you recognize these traits in yourself, don't see them as permanent flaws. See them as survival strategies that have simply outlived their purpose. What once protected you may now be preventing the very connection you seek. The walls that once kept you safe may now be keeping you alone. Remember this: the strongest people are not those who never let anyone in, they are the ones wise enough to know when protection has become isolation, and brave enough to open the door. Once you begin recognizing the invisible walls created by emotional guardedness and excessive self-reliance, another question naturally emerges. If those walls keep people at a distance, what habits ensure they stay there? The answer is rarely dramatic. Friendships do not usually collapse because of one catastrophic event. More often, they slowly fade under the weight of subtle behaviors that seem harmless in the moment, but become destructive over time. The next personality trait is constant judgment and criticism. This trait is often misunderstood because it disguises itself as intelligence. Many highly analytical people believe they are simply observant, they notice flaws quickly, they evaluate people almost instantly. They pride themselves on reading character. While discernment is valuable, there is a hidden danger when observation turns into relentless judgment. Imagine meeting someone new. Before they finish speaking, your mind has already formed a list of conclusions. Their confidence feels fake, their humor seems forced, their opinions sound uninformed, their clothing reveals insecurity. Their success must be luck. Without realizing it, you are no longer having a conversation. You are conducting an internal trial. Psychologically, this behavior often has little to do with the other person. It is usually a reflection of our own inner world. People who constantly judge others often judge themselves even more harshly. Their inner dialogue is filled with impossible standards, constant comparison, and relentless self-criticism. Since the mind sees the world through its own conditioning, it projects those same expectations onto everyone else. If you demand perfection from yourself, you unconsciously demand perfection from others. The result is predictable. Nobody qualifies. Every friendship ends before it truly begins, because every person eventually reveals imperfections. But imperfections are not evidence of bad character. They are evidence of being human. History reminds us that some of the greatest partnerships were built between deeply imperfect individuals. Trust did not emerge because they found flawless companions. It emerged because they learned to distinguish between harmless imperfections and genuine character flaws. There is an important psychological difference between discernment and cynicism. Discernment protects your peace. Cynicism destroys your opportunities. Discernment says, I will observe before I trust. Cynicism says, I already know you cannot be trusted. One approach leaves room for reality. The other leaves room only for confirmation. People sense this energy more than you realize. Human beings are remarkably sensitive to subtle emotional signals. A critical mindset changes your facial expressions, your tone of voice, your body language, and even your patience. Others may never consciously identify what feels uncomfortable, but they instinctively keep their distance. No one enjoys feeling constantly evaluated. Everyone wants to feel accepted before they feel analyzed. This does not mean abandoning standards or ignoring unhealthy behavior. It means understanding that friendship requires curiosity before judgment. Instead of asking, what's wrong with this person, ask yourself, what experiences shaped this person? That single shift changes everything. Curiosity creates conversation, judgment ends it. The fourth personality trait operates much more quietly, yet it can be equally destructive. It is overthinking every interaction. Some people leave a conversation and move on with their day. Others replay every sentence for hours. Did I say something embarrassing? Why did they pause before answering? Were they pretending to like me? What if they misunderstood my joke? The conversation has ended, but inside the mind it continues indefinitely. This habit is exhausting because the brain begins treating imagination as evidence. Instead of responding to reality, it reacts to endless hypothetical situations that never actually happened. Overthinking is often rooted in fear rather than logic. Specifically, it is the fear of rejection. When acceptance becomes emotionally important, the mind attempts to eliminate every possible mistake. It analyzes every facial expression, every text message, every silence, searching for hidden meaning. Ironically, this constant analysis produces the very outcome it hopes to avoid. Someone who overthinks becomes hesitant. They hesitate before speaking. They hesitate before sending a message. They hesitate before expressing interest. They hesitate before accepting invitations. Eventually, hesitation becomes absence. Friendships cannot grow where initiative disappears. Consider how many meaningful relationships throughout your life began with imperfect conversations. Perhaps someone told an awkward joke, perhaps they stumbled over their words, perhaps the first meeting felt uncomfortable. None of that mattered. What mattered was consistency. Connection is rarely created through flawless communication. It is created through repeated interaction over time, Perfection is not attractive, authenticity is. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard once suggested that anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. In modern psychology, we might say anxiety is often the mind's attempt to control an uncontrollable future. You cannot control whether everyone likes you. You cannot control every impression you make. You cannot control every misunderstanding. The attempt to control these things creates endless mental exhaustion. Freedom begins the moment you accept uncertainty. There is another hidden consequence of overthinking. It prevents presence. Instead of listening deeply, your attention turns inward. Instead of enjoying someone's company, you monitor your own performance. Instead of discovering another person's story, you become trapped inside your own thoughts. This is why some conversations feel emotionally distant, even when words are exchanged for hours. Presence has disappeared. The mind is elsewhere. People remember how you make them feel far more than the exact words you speak. A person who is fully present, genuinely curious, and emotionally available often leaves a stronger impression than someone trying desperately to appear impressive. Confidence is not the absence of awkward moments. Confidence is the willingness to continue despite them. Think about the individuals who naturally attract friendships. They are not necessarily the funniest, richest, or most charismatic people in the room. More often they are simply comfortable being imperfect. They laugh at themselves. They recover from mistakes without shame. They do not treat every social interaction as a test they must pass. That ease gives others permission to relax as well. And that is where genuine friendship begins, not in flawless performance, but in mutual acceptance. As you reflect on these traits, notice how closely they are connected. Emotional guardedness builds the walls. Excessive self-reliance convinces you that you do not need anyone. Constant judgment keeps others at a distance. Overthinking prevents you from stepping forward. Together, they create a cycle that feels impossible to escape, yet it is maintained not by fate, but by habits of thought. The encouraging truth is that habits can be changed. The mind that learned fear can also learn trust. The mind that searches for flaws can learn curiosity. The mind trapped in endless analysis can learn presence. Transformation does not begin when the world changes. It begins when your way of seeing the world changes. Remember this: every friendship you never build begins with one assumption, one fear, or one judgment left unchallenged. Change the pattern, and you change the people your life allows in. By now, a pattern should be becoming clear. The first traits we explored were about protection, building emotional walls and convincing yourself that complete self-reliance is strength. The next traits were about perception, judging others too quickly and overthinking every interaction until genuine connection became almost impossible. All of these behaviors point toward one deeper psychological force, the one that quietly shapes them all. It is the fear of authentic connection. This is perhaps the most misunderstood personality trait because it rarely announces itself openly. Very few people wake up and say, "I'm afraid of close relationships." Instead, the fear disguises itself as high standards, independence, busyness, or a preference for solitude. On the surface, these explanations sound reasonable, but beneath them often lies a quieter truth. Closeness requires vulnerability, and vulnerability always carries risk. To understand this, consider a simple question. Why do so many people crave deep friendships while simultaneously avoiding the very situations that create them? The answer is psychological rather than logical. Authentic connection requires us to reveal parts of ourselves that we cannot fully control. It means allowing someone to see our doubts, our failures, our insecurities, and even our hopes. The moment another person truly knows you, they also gain the ability to disappoint you. For many people, that possibility feels more threatening than loneliness itself. The mind makes an unconscious calculation. If I never become deeply attached, I can never be deeply hurt. It sounds like wisdom. In reality, it is fear wearing the mask of intelligence. History and philosophy repeatedly remind us that every meaningful human achievement has required risk. The same principle applies to relationships. Trust is never guaranteed. Loyalty is never guaranteed. Even love is never guaranteed. Yet without accepting uncertainty, genuine connection remains impossible. Many people spend years protecting themselves from pain, only to discover that they have also protected themselves from joy. There is a subtle difference between choosing solitude and being trapped by it. Solitude is powerful when it is a choice. It allows reflection, creativity, discipline, and self-discovery. Throughout history, many of the greatest thinkers deliberately sought periods of isolation to sharpen their minds and strengthen their character. But isolation born from fear is different. It slowly convinces you that your comfort zone is your identity. You begin declining invitations, you stop reaching out, you assume people are too busy to care, you tell yourself if they wanted to talk to me, they would. Over time, silence becomes normal. The tragedy is that the longer this pattern continues, the more difficult it feels to break, not because people have rejected you, but because your own mind has become accustomed to emotional distance. This is how loneliness becomes a habit rather than a circumstance. There is another important truth that many overlook. People are not looking for perfection when they seek friendship. They are looking for sincerity. Think about the people you trust most. They probably are not the most successful, the most confident, or the most impressive individuals you have ever met. What makes them valuable is something far simpler. You know where you stand with them. They are genuine. They are emotionally consistent. They allow themselves to be human. Ironically, many people spend years trying to appear impressive, believing that admiration creates friendship. Yet admiration alone creates distance. Authenticity creates closeness. There is an important psychological principle at work here. Human beings naturally connect through shared humanity, not through flawless performance. Every time you admit a mistake, express gratitude, acknowledge uncertainty, or genuinely listen without trying to appear superior, you communicate something powerful. You become real, and reality is far more attractive than perfection. This does not mean becoming emotionally dependent on others. That is the opposite extreme. The goal is not to seek constant approval or to build your identity around other people's opinions. Real emotional strength is balance. It is the ability to enjoy your own company while remaining open to meaningful relationships. It is knowing how to stand alone without convincing yourself that you must always stand alone. This distinction is crucial. Some people confuse independence with isolation. Others confuse connection with dependence. Wisdom avoids both extremes. Imagine a tree growing in the middle of a forest. It has deep roots that allow it to stand firmly on its own. Yet beneath the surface, those roots are connected to an entire network. They exchange nutrients, communicate through complex biological systems, and support one another during difficult conditions. Strength and connection exist together. Nature itself teaches this lesson. Human beings are no different. The strongest individuals are not those who refuse every helping hand. They are the ones who remain secure enough to both give and receive support. This transformation begins with awareness. The moment you recognize these patterns, they begin losing their control over you. You notice when you are assuming the worst about someone before giving them a chance. You notice when you replay conversations that deserve to be left in the past. You notice when fear disguises itself as independence. Awareness creates choice, and choice creates change. Change rarely happens through dramatic gestures. It happens through small decisions repeated consistently. Reply to the message you almost ignored. Accept the invitation you were preparing to decline. Ask someone how they are, and genuinely listen to the answer. Share one honest thought instead of another carefully rehearsed response. Express appreciation instead of assuming people already know. These actions appear ordinary. Psychologically, they are revolutionary. Each one weakens the invisible walls that have separated you from others. Each one teaches your mind that connection is not as dangerous as fear once convinced you. There will still be disappointments. Some people will misunderstand you. Some friendships will naturally fade. Some individuals will not value your authenticity. That is part of life. But those experiences should refine your judgment, not harden your heart. Never allow one betrayal to become a permanent philosophy about humanity. The people who build fulfilling lives are not those who avoid every emotional risk. They are those who learn from pain without allowing pain to define them. As this journey comes full circle, remember the 5 personality traits we explored: emotional guardedness, excessive self-reliance, constant judgment, overthinking, and fear of authentic connection are not signs that someone is destined to remain lonely forever. They are learned patterns, and what is learned can also be unlearned. The moment you stop treating these behaviors as fixed parts of your personality, you regain the power to change them. Your future relationships will not be determined by your past disappointments. They will be determined by the courage you choose to practice today. The greatest transformation does not happen when you find better people. It happens when you become someone who is no longer afraid to be truly known. Because in the end, the walls that protect you from rejection may also be the very walls that keep friendship, trust, and fulfillment from ever finding their way into your life. Tear down those walls, and you do not just change your relationships, you change the direction of your entire life.